Welcome back to the Green Party Town Hall here on CNN. Dr. Stein, you're talking about a very provocative and intriguing concept. You said there are 43 million people out there carrying student debt, right? And I know that number, and some estimate that number could be twice that if you look at all the people who continue to carry it up well into adulthood. Many people say it is the new mortgage of this generation. So the question becomes, something as enticing as erasing all student debt begs the question. How could you ever do that? How?
So let me say first, we found a way to bail out Wall Street. And when we needed the money, we found it, including about $17 trillion worth of practically zero interest loans, which was made available, as needed. We found a way to bail out Wall Street, the guys that crashed the economy with their waste, fraud, and abuse. So my point is, as responsible adults, we need to bail out a younger generation that is held hostage in this unpayable student debt. It's terrible for them. It's terrible for our whole society, because it's always the younger generation that leads us forward to create the economy of the future and to lead the social changes that we urgently need right now.
But the concept itself, as enticing as it is, there's one apples to oranges thing here. Quantitative easing, which you've talked about, TARP, TALF, whatever acronym you want to throw at how we dealt with the banks in 2008, right or wrong, those loans, zero interest in some cases, some not, were repaid.
That's right.
So that would not erase student debt, right? Because no matter what interest rate is, you still got the principal.
Right.
So how do you do this? Because it's not going to be the same mechanism as you had with the banks, because they repaid the loans.
That's right.
And how would you ever get a Congress that wants to do nothing like this to do anything like this?
So, it was easy for the banks to repay the loans because they're an extremely advantaged and privileged group. They get the money at zero interest, they loan it out at 7%, so it's really easy for them to pay back those loans. Young people are not in that situation. They don't have the jobs that we need. We don't have an economy that can employ them. So here's what I'm suggesting. That debt is largely owned now by the federal government, the vast bulk of it. I'm suggesting that the Federal Reserve actually buy that debt, like it did for Wall Street, but in this case, that it buy that debt and it basically declare that debt null and void, which essentially means that the Federal Reserve would be expanding the money supply into the hands of young people so that they can spend it into the economy instead of having to pay back the loans with their hard-earned dollars. They now own their hard-earned dollars. So what I'm
hold
saying...
on, let me make sure that we understand it. So the Federal Reserve would buy the debt.
Yes.
So they would expire the debt, whatever
right.
the accounting equivalent is. We're talking about 1.3 or so trillion dollars.
That's right.
And then you're saying they would also take that amount of money in new currency and give it to the people who held the loans?
No, what I'm saying is that they basically cancel the loans, which is like giving it's almost like giving students money. They don't actually give them money. This means that instead of the students paying the bank,
so they retire the entire debt. So you have to go to Congress and say,
money.
Here's why I think we should expand the debt by $1.3 trillion.
But Chris, and I think we need to make a corrective. Quantitative easing was the creation of money. They created money and handed that money to the banks at the tune of $85 billion a month. Let me say that one more time. $85 billion a month. So if there's mechanisms that can be found to basically prop up the banks, why can't the American people get propped up once in a while?
It's a legitimate question. It's a legitimate question. Believe me, I take no pleasure in being the person who has to check the idea of not having any student debt. But that, unfortunately, is the job. I don't know that that's the best analogy. It is the right political imperative. You found a way to do this, you should find a way to do that. I don't know that it's the same mechanisms involved, though. That's why I'm asking the question.
And I think the point here is that there are many potential mechanisms. Congress could also be asked to come up with the money. But there's another way to do this, and that is the Federal Reserve doesn't need the permission of Congress. This is an act that the Federal Reserve can take on its own. Yes, we would sort of owe that money to ourselves. We would owe that money to ourselves. But as a nation, we have the capacity to do that. We can decide to spend money on ourselves. And in particular, we can decide to spend money on our younger generation who currently does not have a future. Who is more worth spending money on than our younger generation?